So, children, in this part we will discuss about all the phases of menstrual cycle once again in detail and the changes which take place. So, we can see the division into various parts. See here, I have drawn some lines here which has divided it into certain parts. The first line, it shows the changes in the uterine wall. As you can see here, I have written changes in the uterine wall. Then the next line shows the changes in the ovarian hormones. Then next third line, it shows the changes in the ovary itself. So there are these different changes which are occurring, and at the top you can see the pituitary gland and its hormones which are changing according to the changes which are occurring, which are taking place in the ovary. So this chart will explain the changes that take place simultaneously in various areas. So we can see them through this division which is shown in this chart. And below here we can see that the phases division I have mentioned, this and this. So menstrual, follicular, ovulation and luteal phase. So the first phase, we are going to talk about menstrual phase. The first phase, what exactly happens is that endometrium lining, I have shown this, endometrium lining is lost. So we can assume here this as a endometrium lining and it is getting lost, and this is known as menstruation, and this takes place when progesterone level is very low. So during this phase, now you can see here low progesterone level. This is secreted by corpus luteum. This is lowest level of progesterone, and when it is low, then progesterone is not able to maintain the thick endometrium, the uterus lining. So when progesterone level is falling, then what is happening? The endometrium lining is lost in the form of menstruation. Now this low level of progesterone is going to stimulate the pituitary gland. So low level of progesterone, that is the change in the ovarian hormone, uterine wall mein menstruation, the menses is taking place, and changes in the pituitary gland is that this level, low level of progesterone will stimulate pituitary gland to increase the secretion of FSH. So, FSH is follicular stimulating hormone, and so because of this pituitary gland, it starts producing FSH. So what has happened so far in this first 4 to 5 days, that is in the menstrual phase, the endometrial lining is lost and the progesterone level is low, and when the level is low at this time, there is an stimulation of anterior lobe of pituitary gland which produces the hormone FSH. Its production increases, and in the ovary, those clusters which were there, out of those one, क्योंकि FSH secrete हुआ, तो one this follicle will start growing, and finally it becomes bigger and changes into the Graafian follicle. So there are the stages of growth under the influence of this FSH, and it changes. Now let us see one more time. The beginning of the cycle is menstrual cycle. What is happening here? Endometrium lining is shedding. There is low level of progesterone. It has stimulated pituitary gland which secretes FSH. As soon as FSH is secreted, the follicles in the ovary start growing and the Graafian follicle is formed. So follicles start secreting their hormones here, that is estrogen. So in this case, you can see estrogen is secreted. Here estrogen level is going to increase. You can see here I have shown it with this red line. It shows the level of the estrogen. Now this estrogen level secretion increases there because of FSH. So follicles are growing because of FSH, and now the changes in the endometrium. So because of estrogen, which you see this was scrapped off, so it has started repairing itself. This lining which was scrapped off, it starts repairing itself. It becomes thick and folded and becomes 2 to 3 millimeter thick and glandular. So that is the second phase. that is follicular phase. Glands are formed which are going to produce this secretion. This phase is under the influence of the follicle, and that is why we call this as the follicular phase. Because of primary, because you see the primary follicle is growing and it is growing to bring the changes, so it also helps in the production of hormone. At this level, estrogen level is so high that in this case estrogen level reaches high, means it goes higher. So it stimulates pituitary gland. It stimulates pituitary gland so that it can secrete FSH, and also increases the secretion of LH. So both these are secreted high. Now FSH secretion should go down because one secondary oocyte has developed, you can see, which is going to develop into egg. Now no new development is going to take place because female's body is designed like that in such a manner that it can perfectly hold only one embryo. So no new follicle should be formed, no new egg should be formed. That is why FSH secretion should stop, क्योंकि एक follicle develop हो गया तो अब FSH is not required, so the secretion should stop. So this high estrogen, ये जो estrogen secrete हो रहा है, it stimulates the pituitary gland to decrease the secretion of FSH and increase the secretion of LH. So now from pituitary gland LH is released and it is responsible for ovulation, which is the next phase of this. So Graafian follicle will rupture, releasing secondary oocyte. This takes place on the 14th day, that is called as ovulation. So here ovulation is taking place. At this point LH is maximum. अब यहाँ पे LH maximum हो गया, and this high LH we call it as LH surge. This tip, this is what we call as LH surge, and it's responsible for ovulation. So what has happened? From the Graafian follicle the egg has been released, and the change, this changes to corpus luteum. Now the formation of corpus luteum again requires LH. So here Graafian follicle, you see, Graafian follicle changes into corpus luteum and LH is required. This corpus luteum will produce, you all know which hormone? Progesterone. Now if we go back and see progesterone level at the beginning, it was very less, slight increase, then once देखो धीरे धीरे it is increasing, and once the corpus luteum is formed, then what happens that this progesterone secretion increases. Under the influence of high progesterone level, what will happen again? The endometrium lining becomes thick and even thicker, say 5 mm thickness it reaches. So it is known as luteal phase, which is the last phase. This corpus luteum is going to remain if fertilization takes place. So if this corpus luteum stays, progesterone level remains high progesterone level, and if the fertilization takes place, and if the fertilization, no fertilization is there, what will happen? Progesterone level will fall, again the cycle will take place like that. So corpus luteum, if it is staying, progesterone level रहेगा क्योंकि corpus luteum secrete करता है. So throughout the gestation period it remains high. But if fertilization is not taking place, then what happens? On the 14th day when the egg is released, egg remains there in the fallopian tube for 2 days. If it gets fertilized within those 2 days, then fertilization will take place, corpus luteum will persist. If fertilization does not take place, then this corpus luteum is going to change into corpus albicans. The next corpus luteum will convert into corpus albicans. It starts to degenerate. If it starts to degenerate, in that case progesterone level will fall, it will come to its minimum level again. That means fertilization when it is not taken place, तो progesterone level will start falling down, and originally जहाँ पे था it reaches there. And if fertilization takes place, progesterone level is high. So thick endometrium lining will not be maintained if progesterone is not formed, and this will be lost again in the form of menstrual flow. So the entire cycle is divided into 4 phases. The first phase completes into 4 to 5 days, and the next phase into 10 to 12 days. Follicular phase, that is 10 to 12 days. Ovulatory phase 1 day, maybe sometimes 1 or 2 days. Then after that is the luteal phase. So all these are the changes which are taking place in the endometrium of the uterus, and these changes are there in the hormones of the ovary, and they are produced from the ovarian follicles. Then there is a stimulation to produce some hormones from the pituitary gland, increase or decrease some hormones, that all is under the control of pituitary gland. So it is a self-regulating system where the hormone level increases or goes down, increase or decrease, and these changes, they make the female, or it prepares the female for fertilization and then implantation. Why this kind of endometrium is required? Because if fertilization is going to take place, zygote is formed and it is going to get fixed in the uterine depressions, and then the chorionic villi formation, placenta formation would take place. But if there is no fertilization, then this endometrium lining is not required. So under the influence of estrogen and progesterone, it becomes thicker and vascular, but when progesterone level falls, the lining of endometrium cannot be maintained, and that is when it is lost in the form of menstrual flow. So now we can correlate all the changes taking place at the same time with the hormones and the organ. So it is a characteristic feature of human female, and theoretically if you see, it is perfectly completed in 28 days, but it is variable. That means it can go a little higher. Variable means plus minus 4 days, 5 days. So that is all about the description of menstrual cycle. In the next part, we are going to talk about oestrus cycle, because sometimes the difference between these two can be asked, and then we will continue with the fertilization. Thank you children, I hope it is clear.